Hi, this is Ivan Velez, showing you a better world through comics. Once upon a time in the Bronx, there was a Puerto Rican boy who loved Astro Boy and the church and monsters. And comics, all sorts of comics, who didn't love him back. He loved Bruce Lee and the Uncanny X-Men. And he even learned to do his own comics. And he told stories about people without voices that a lot of people didn't want to hear. And he began to be heard. He got recruited to work in mainstream comics for Milestone Media and could tell stories about people of color in color. And it was a great time. He even worked for DC Comics and Marvel. Hey, he even did kid stuff until he couldn't anymore. So he started his own stuff and did more stories about more people, about more things. He taught his skills to kids just like him and decided to do his own stories, show his own art, and be his own person. Yeah, that was a lot, wasn't it? One of the key points I want you to take from that is how unfair things used to be. For instance, when I was a kid, there were no characters of color. No brown people, no Asian people, just basically no black folks. It was just totally one type of person, one type of superhero. Not only that, our fairy tales were the same way too. Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, they're all fairy tales from Europe and kind of excluded everyone else. And that's unfair, because every kid has the right to see their own faces reflected in the heroes. Since the early days of comic strips and the first comic books, you only had one type of person represented. There was no people of color, no brown, no Asian, no Latino, certainly no African American, only one type of story, over and over again. Even during the golden age of comic book heroes, where there were so many comic books out there, so many different types of characters with different flavors, mystery, horror, adventure, science fiction, still just one type of person. These comic books went all over the world to every American, yet they only showed one kind of American over and over again, over and over again. But back in the 60s, during the height of the Civil Rights era, some people tried to tell different stories, add a little bit more diversity. And while 99.999% of Marvel and DC comic characters were all white, still there was a few attempts to bring new stories in, new color to the characters. Unfortunately, most of these stories were not written by any people of color, and sometimes they didn't ring quite true. But even that's changing now. Especially in the 70s, when the giant-sized X-Men #1 came out, and all of a sudden diversity became a big selling point. And even the 80s brought forth a different kind of independent spirit that told different types of stories from different points of views, had characters of different sexual orientations, had different gender identities, different cultures, which was such a new and daring thing to do. People, including myself, felt this new freedom to show themselves and their point of views. And the 90s brought forth many more attempts. Spawn became one of the top-selling comics of the day. And Milestone created a whole bunch of characters of color, including characters with different sexual orientations and gender identities, first transgender heroes, different shades and different characters, which was so important back then. And so brand new, even though it was already the 90s. And even now, more and more exciting changes happening. You have Spider-Man that's both Latino and Black. You have a Batwoman who's a lesbian. You have many, many characters who are different faith, different abilities, different shades, different colors. And all of it is happening because of you. Even Japan, which is probably the best-selling comic book empire in the world, and while the characters are certainly diverse in shape and size and hair color and gender identity, they're still struggling with issues of race and multiculturalism. Even the fabulous internet with its new platforms like webtoons, where you can read comics for free. with so many new creators that are going in and just showing their stuff and are able to share not only the genres that they love, but the type of person they are, the universe they're used to, their stories from their lands, their stories from their families, their stories from themselves. It's an exciting new time right now. So let's practice doing different things without different characters. Chibis. Chibis are the most simple type of characters in the world. Again, round head, kind of like a small body. Arms on the top part, legs on the bottom. Okay, very simple. They're the #1 character in the entire planet. They make great toys, video game characters, t-shirt designs, etc., etc. You can make anything into chibi. So when you make a chibi, if you make a little cross, that tells you where the eyes and the noses go. By the way, I'm drawing a little hard with my pencil right now. If I were you, I'll draw lightly so you can erase pretty easily. Eye on one side, big eyeball. And this is what makes it chibi super cute or kawaii. So let's say ears. So there you have a character who doesn't really have a race or ethnicity attached to them, so that's okay. But I would make characters that look like people in your family. So if you have a little bit of a nose, a bigger size nose, or smaller nose, or longer nose, or longer face, or longer chin, if your family looks like that, try to do that in your characters. My family tends to have round noses, so I will put a little bit more of a round nose, okay? So little things can make it different, little details. For instance, skin tones. I'm a Latino. I'm a Puerto Rican from the Bronx. In my family, I have a light-skinned mother and a dark-skinned father. So of course, the children are all gonna look a little different with a little bit of different skin tone. That is not represented in a lot of stories. And you can do that really easily. All you have to do is change the coloring a little bit. Change the way people do hair. Not that flat, wavy hair that I have in every character, but something with a little bit of curl or body or more natural. Let's do hair. So a quick way to do different types of hair is, let's say if you want to do braids, okay? So braids are kind of easy because lots of folks get braids, and what you can do is just play with the lines there, give a little texture, and then kind of fill them up a little bit, see? That's one way of doing braids. There's many, many different ways of doing braids. If you look on the internet, you're gonna see beautiful, beautiful techniques on how to draw this kind of hair. But this is pretty easy for a simple chibi design. I like to have a little kind of like stuff hanging in the bottom and the back like that. A little bit of texture, you know, maybe has a break coming down here. Again, it doesn't look like boy or girl. So it doesn't matter in your story until it matters, right? So let's say I like her, or I like him. So let's make some sneakers. Okay. Now, let's say if I want to do a character with another type of different hair. Say, okay, same kind of basic character. All right. Let's, again, with that cross, very lightly. What if you want to do dreads? Just like this, a little nose, smile. So dreads, my way of doing dreads is basically I do the shape. Very Charlie Brown, isn't it? You kind of do these big noodles. Now some dreads are kind of heavy, so you want to kind of overlap them a little bit. Maybe some of them, the gravity is hitting them, so it's going more down. So depending how long the dreads are, but if you're going to do cute style like this, you kind of play with them. Whoops, let's do this. Control Z. Okay. Kind of play with them. And what's good about this is that if you want to put texture on them or a different color on them, they're very easy to do. And yeah, they look like noodles, or those little plastic noodles that people play with. What are they called, those? But they look kind of fun too. What if you want to do curly hair? Well, let's do a character again. Now, what's good about chibis is that it can be any age, but since they're kind of very cute and distorted, they're gonna look the way you want to. So you can play with the shape of the eyes, depending on the skin coloring, the kind of clothing they wear, the hairstyle. Like this kid looks really cool, kind of bald. If I want to do something here, curly, So I can do like this. So it's more like the girls in my family tend to have really kind of big, bushy, curly hair. Okay. And kind of play with your eraser. All right. Remember, when you want to do different types of hair, you got to do the shape of it first and then go in with the details. What if you want to, let's get rid of the hair right now. You can do any kind of hair. You can do like short hair. Oops, let's get a pencil there. I like bangs, by the way. Makes it very cool. Now this is very classic, kind of like schoolgirl short hair. You can do natural hair. Natural hair, I love natural hair because it goes up a little bit. So you kind of do the shape of it first. And by the way, natural hair can be in any color you want. You can go down there and add a little bit of texture on the bottom, make this a little bit darker. Let me make a pencil. This is in pencil line. If you do inking, again, this will be like dark swaths of color here. And then you do texture. Texture is a little bit of, on top of here, you can put dots here and there to kind of show off the afro, okay? So you can do all sorts of hair. Oh, I like this here too. In different color lines, okay? Different body types. You notice how all superheroes, and including the women and the men, are all very muscular and very fit? Well, not all heroic people look like that. Some are rounder, some are thinner, some have different body shapes. Just doing a little bit of that can really help change the game. Different body types are pretty important in comics. Let's do a chibi. Let's say chibi is a little chubbier. I was a very chubby kid, and I never saw any superhero. I did see one kid called Bouncing Boy. Still, I didn't feel like he represented any really cool characters the way that he was written. But let's say if you want to do a chibi, and just a little bigger. But let's say if you just want to make a big person, that's totally okay. There are many big people in the world. There are people who are different sizes, and there are large sizes as well. Okay, so if you want to do, let's say, with a big belly, maybe some sneakers, just as cute as all the other characters, okay? And what's good about them, if you use them in situations where they're the hero or they're actually helping a lot and, you know, their powers are needed and stuff like that, they should be just as valid as every other character in there. Try not to make them the funny guy just because they're bigger. Try to make them heroes sometimes. They're useful, they're powerful in their own way, and that way you don't have to think about, let's see what kind of hair. I like kind of tough hair, right? Some characters tend to fall into the Joker character or the character that people laugh at, and that's very unfair, particularly if it's the same type of character. I think they usually make people who are a little larger the funny character. You don't have to do that. You can do different things. You can make them just as valid, as serious as everybody else, okay? When you want to make a better world in comics, you got to think about fairness. Who can I include to make things fair? What kind of characters can I include to make things fair? For instance, there is ability. People with what we used to call handicaps, right? People in wheelchairs, people who walk a little differently, people who have vision problems, people who have hearing problems, people who have inborn disabilities, developmental disabilities, educational disabilities. They were really missing from comic books for the longest time. And there's still not too many of them around now. And you can change that pretty easy. Just include them in your drawings. Let's try another type of character. Let's say this character maybe has a brace, or maybe their legs are a little different than other people, right? Maybe they have something congenital or something happened and they need to have one of these. Well, they have assistants, right? Like they have assistant kind of pole for walking. So again, just kind of like being, doing your research and understanding the mechanics behind it and how they walk and how they're gonna show their body language when they walk. Just do some research and study up on the kind of character you want, and if they have a different kind of like state of being. Kids who are blind, you know how they make kids who are blind with those blank eyes? Well, a lot of kids don't have those blank eyes. So remember that they're also very able, except they just need help getting places, okay? Kids who are deaf won't be any different, but their body language will be different and communicate more with their bodies and their hands. It's nice if you're gonna do a character, maybe learn a little bit of sign language and how to express that in a comic strip. So a character who's blind It depends on the kind of blindness, if they were born with blindness or it came later. A lot of people do wear glasses, particularly if their eyes are a little bit different shaped than most kids. So it's up to you to kind of find out what kind of blindness your character has and do the character accordingly. So let's say my character is a girl, okay? Now she's blind. So those dogs, right? The dogs are cool. So remember, if you're doing a dog, again, the head, the body, you kind of play with the legs. Dogs are very cool. And I think there's a certain type of brace you have, and that's, again, something to research. Remember, if you're going to do a chibi in a wheelchair, okay, think about the body, bend the body. See, if the head's a ball and the body's a string, you bend the string over, put the body around the string. You see how his legs can go like this now? They bend, okay? Now, this is for kids who, or characters who may be in the wheelchair or use one of those different able chairs. By the way, a lot of people who use those chairs use it for a part of the day as well. There's some kids who need it all the time, but there's some kids who need it like a lot of the time and not all the time, okay? All types of different chairs. Some are really cool and sporty. Now, there are kids who have those motorized chairs that go by themselves, so they don't have to have anyone push them, which is a feature and says a lot about their personality too. Okay, let's say this is a kid from the Bronx. How are you doing? What's up? How you doing? Okay, a lot of kids with wheelchairs in the Bronx. Sometimes the bodies are a little different. So if you have a wheelchair, you know, think about what type of body the character has. Now, if you want to draw kids, right away, there's a couple of really cool characters of kids who have Down syndrome, or characters that have Down syndrome, which again, it's like something happens, it's a genetic chromosomal thing where some people may have learning disabilities. There's all different grades of Down syndrome. If you want to do somebody like that, part of your story, again, treat them like everybody else. Don't make them like the after school special where you meet a kid who's different and then you never see them again. Make them a part of the story. Maybe they're the superhero. So the only thing about Down syndrome is they're not really any different. You might want to make their eyes a little bit more almond, but that's probably the only detail that's a little different, okay? And let's say, make a girl with Down syndrome. So all these characters, they're differently able, they have different types of bodies, and they're just as valid as every other character, and they can be really interesting and fun, and a great addition to whatever story you're telling. So this person, if you were writing a story about that included gender and orientation, you can actually say this person could be either gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender or a boy or girl or intergender. It could be anything you want. And it's all up to your story, okay? You also should think about gender, identity, and orientation. Now, those are kind of like really adult topics that people discuss and argue about all the time. But when you think about comic books, you've only had like 2 genders and 1 orientation in comic books. And it was a boy and a girl, they fall in love and they get married, which is the oldest story in the world, right? But there are other people around. The other people who are different. The other people who love different types of people. The other people who are born different types of people. And the other people who have different types of feelings. And we have to be fair to include them because there's so many of them around, including myself. When I was a kid, there were no role models. And I didn't know how to be the way I was. So let's say you have a gender. A gender is one path. A gender is who you're born as, right? It's an X chromosome, Y chromosome combination. Now, right now, people are understanding that it's more than what you're born as. It's actually something else that happens too. It's identity. Now, identity is what you feel you're inside. It's what your brain tells you is your gender. For instance, when we close our eyes, we receive signals from the world, from the universe, from everyone around us, and from ourselves of what we are, of who we are. And some people may have been born with one gender, but they realize from the signals they're getting, the signals inside their own brain, and signals from the universe, that they're another gender. So that's identity. Now, there's another thing that really complicates things as well. It's the whole idea of orientation. Orientation is basically who you're attracted to. So let's say if you close your eyes and you open them and there's someone really beautiful in front of you. How long does it take you to feel that attraction to them? Well, for most people, it's instantly. There's no thought about it. It just happens. So that is your orientation. So whether it's male or female, or maybe it's another gender, that's your orientation, who you're attracted to. Now, some people have all sorts of different feelings for different genders or different orientations. Some people can be flexible with their identities, but these are serious parts of our bodies, in our brains, in our souls, in our psyches. Orientation is a very important thing because it actually tells us who we're attracted to, what kind of person we love, and it's really part of identity. Since there are three major tracks of who makes us who we are: our gender, our identity, and our orientation. Things can get tricky because there are three different tracks, but guess what? They touch upon each other in different ways. So it just makes things a little bit complicated. So when people are talking about orientation and people are very angry that it's not just one thing that's set in stone, people argue about it all the time. People have all thoughts about it. People bring religion into it. People bring morality into it. People bring their own experience into it. So it can get confusing for many people. It can get very, very contentious. We live in a time right now where these issues are coming in front. People are getting married. People of different genders are marrying people of different genders. People of different orientations are marrying people of different orientations. Human beings are marrying human beings. And it doesn't matter what identity they have, what gender they have in their orientation. That's a wonderful thing. Creating characters who are of different gender and different orientation actually helps people understand. And having story characters that reflect that is very powerful and very fair and just. Now, when you're doing superheroes, again, doing somebody who's different than the regular, white bread, Captain America, Superman kind of thing. Remember, if you draw the circle and the string is the spine, okay, chest, stomach, and then the pelvis as a triangle, okay? Shoulder, shoulder, hip, hip. You kind of do the skeleton out, give us some body language, okay? Now, if you're doing somebody different gender, like intergender, so let's say a character who's intergender or gender fluid, maybe you have a gender fluid character too, is a person who has qualities of both male and female. They used to call it androgyny, where you have a character who's not really male or female, or a little bit of both. So those characters are pretty simple. There are a lot of them in anime and manga. Characters who are very pretty, yet they're not boys or girls, or they can be both, depending. Or you're surprised to find out that a character you thought was a girl is a boy. So that's kind of like interesting way of approaching it. Remember the L? The letter L is to do the feet. Remember, L, that little angle is the heel, and then you go up from the toe, and you have a quick way of doing the foot. Okay. So characters like that can be very interesting. They're wonderful to design. And just have fun with those kind of characters. You gotta think about the humanity of a character, who do they love, what kind of characters they are, what they think is good, what they think is bad. Just like everyone else, their favorite food, what kind of books they like to read, where they like to hang out. All these kind of things is part of the character makeup. And people of different genders or different orientations, they have the same things. They have the same likes. They like movies, different types of movies, different types of TV shows. They like certain sports. So basically, any kind of character, no matter what the gender and the identity, you can actually make them very interesting, but just focusing on what they like and dislike and the elements, what makes them interesting, right? If you notice, there's a lot of characters, like even Naruto, where a lot of the characters are a little androgynous, where they look both male and female, and that's kind of cool. That's very cool. Let's make the shoulders a little bigger. The person's learning to box and defend themselves, which is kind of cool. Remember, if they have different sexual orientations, if they're gay, lesbian, bisexual, the design of the character doesn't really change. I mean, if they're a gay male character, they don't have to wear pink, okay, or lavender, all right? If they're a lesbian character, they don't have to have like short hair, or or be like really like overtly masculine. Be careful with stereotypes. All right, let's see if I make a character like this. Let's make him. We can actually make him a Filipino character. We have not have many Filipino characters at all in this country. Of course, in the Philippines, they have wonderful, amazing comic books done by wonderful, amazing cartoonists. When I went there, I met a few of them, and they're just rocking the world with some amazing stuff there. And I hope that we get to see more of that in the States soon. Okay, but if you want to make a character like this, do a little bit of research. Okay, find out, if the person is coming from a certain city, find out about that city. Find out what the life is like there. There's plenty of stuff. There's plenty of information on the internet now. Okay, so if you want to make him like a golden, say a golden sun character with sun powers or something like that, that'd be kind of interesting. Maybe he's a gay character. There's nothing different in the design except nothing different at all. Okay. When you're doing different features and faces, let's say if this is, remember, nose, mouth, chin, right? If you're going to do a male character, think about if they have arm and eyes, if they're a little bit more Asian, then study on how to do arm and eyes, okay? If a person has more of a pug nose or rounded nose, like people in your family, then know how to draw the nose. If a person has more pronounced lips, that's totally fine. Remember that the only cartoons back in the old days were horrible racist cartoons that showed like really huge lips, and they kind of made fun of people's features. But you want to accentuate the features and make them interesting and beautiful, just like everyone else's features, right? Okay, and think about hair too, just like we did the Chibis. Think about different things when you're doing superheroes. Age. Do you know that it's very hard to find a superhero that's kind of like elderly? When you think about it, if Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman had aged normally during their time, Batman would probably be in his 80s right now, right? Wonder Woman would be in her 80s. So think about, if you're going to do an old person, try not to make a cartoon of an elderly person. Remember that older people, their muscle structure is smaller due to age, okay? But doesn't mean they're totally weak, okay? Especially if they're superheroes. Superheroes have powers, so even an older person with powers is gonna be like that, okay? They might have a bit of a curve in the back, depending on their life, okay, and their lifestyle. So if you're gonna do that, that's okay too. Older people have full lives. They have maybe some lines in their eyes. That's totally fine. Older people should not look sad all the time. That's something that I've seen in comics a lot. They make older people very sad, okay? Just some lines, maybe, kind of show off the age. People earn those wrinkles, right? Hair should be a little different, not quite as full. Oh, some people have full, and some people wear hair pieces, and that's fine too. So think about when you draw older people, don't forget their power and the respect that they should be commanding after being after being around for so many years. You've seen a few things. I'm gonna make mine kind of like a Captain America type, but of course he's a Latino from maybe he fought in the war and got powers in Korea or something like that. Hey, that's a story. If people need to work with a cane, draw the cane properly, make a cool cane if you can. Remember when you're doing the body language, people who are a little bit slower in their walking, well, you can do that if you show your story that way. But do not make them look decrepit. That's something that, even though some people do break down when they get older, depending on the person, if you're doing characters that are superheroes and stuff like that, you don't have to make them decrepit, okay? Women, of course, when they get older, just like men, of course, they have the lines, right, and the eyes and stuff like that. But depending who they are, depending on ethnicity, people age in different ways as well, depending what country they come from. A lot of times because of climate and diet or genes. Some people just get older quicker or age a different way. So remember, maybe a little, lines on the forehead to kind of show age. Things like that will kind of make a person a little older looking. I'm going to give her the power gloves because I'm going to go Afrofuturistic. By the way, Afrofuturism is about making those science fiction stories that include people of color, particularly African Americans or Africans, and using some of their mythology as well, because a lot of science fiction totally excluded people of color. So Afrofuturism is a way of kind of correcting that and making great stories that feature African Americans as well. Tribal futurism is using indigenous people. They have Latino futurism, that kinds of all kinds of stuff. And it's funny when you go to, if you visit China or Korea or Japan, there's a lot of science fiction stories, and they don't have this kind of thing because in their countries, that's all they know. So of course, all their characters and all their stories are going to feature Asian characters because that's the kind of country they have from. Okay, but America is different because we have so many different types here, and we want to be more fair, include more stories to kind of include the population here. Okay, now let's give her. I'm going to give her some cool kind of like a mask. Let's give her kind of like this. Oh, she looks like a warrior. All right. And again, gender roles. Be careful of going to stereotypes. Don't make all your women homemakers, okay? Don't make all your women passive. Don't make all your women wear pink or like rosy colors. That you can do that. It's a kind of wonderful thing. Like if you see something like Sailor Moon where everything's super feminine, that's actually a feature that's very attractive and it's kind of fun. But if you're making other stories and stuff like that, you want to include diversity, go like what they're doing with She-Ra right now. Very diverse characters, different gender identities. It's kind of interesting. So she's more of like futuristic character, older woman. Maybe that's her brother. Different body types. Okay, if you're gonna make a character, you can make a rounded character. What I mean by rounded, people who are bigger. There are a lot of, if you look at America, there's a lot of people of size here, and they need kind of representation too. You don't have many characters, not even supporting characters of people who are not 120 pounds. If you can actually create characters that kind of reflect that, it's just powerful. It's a very, very wonderful thing to be represented and to be validated by seeing yourself on paper. So if you see a person on paper that looks like you, then you really know that people are paying attention to people like you, because they're paying attention enough to write about you, to draw stories about you. And that's what's really important about doing our own stories too. You put it out there and people will see. I'm going to make my character kind of strong. So people with big bellies, people with maybe endomorphs bodies where you have like smaller shoulders and maybe a little rounder. Those are cool too. Like more regular people. I think superheroes should really start looking more like regular people instead of like these crazy gym nuts. People go to the gym all the time and take steroids. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing for America right now. So this type of characters. Thin, tall, wide, short, stocky, different abilities. Again, diversity is really important. So thanks for listening to me and watching some demos. Hope when you get out there and create new stories and new characters, you include a little fairness, a little wise understanding, and kind of like a desire to make things into a better world through your comics. Ciao.